You're listening to 40 Fit Radio, your source for health, fitness, and lifestyle for the 40-plus community. This is your host, Darin. Welcome to the 40 Fit Nation. All right, so we're going to talk about programming concepts today. We're going to call it low-stress programming. And we're going to be, I think, in the next several weeks, the next quarter, this year, whatever.
For the next decade.
Yeah, for the next decade. We're going to be talking just about general programming concepts. And we always say this statement that it just matters. We do have a construct of what programming should look like, definitely for the novice and for the intermediate. But as things change and as goals change, programming becomes very creative. I always say it's, everybody's like, oh man, do you ever get tired of coaching novices? It's so hard. I'm like, oh, it's so easy to coach novices.
Right.
It's so easy because it's just simple.
It is.
It's simple, hard, and effective. It works. It's just simple. And as someone gets more mature as a lifter or as a client in the world of fitness, in any world of fitness, whether it be a CrossFitter, a lifter, an Olympic lifter, an endurance athlete, whatever. It gets harder as a coach.
Yeah.
You have to become more creative. You have to mix it up more often if you want progressional gains over time.
Right.
So what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about some of the programming concepts that we use as coaches to dial the weekly stress or by session stress back, but still make some type of gain.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so the more we've talked about this before on our podcast, and I'll continue to emphasize this, the more my body ages, the more I am observant to the fact that I can't train the way I used to train even 5-10 years ago. I can't handle the constant loading and still feel healthy, mobile, still have that feeling and sense of wellness. So I had a conversation with Jim Sharp, the professional bull rider the world, what is he? Hall of Fame, PRCA bull rider, first guy to ever ride 10 for 10 bulls for 10 days in the National Finals rodeo in rodeo history. The guy is
the Razor.
Yeah, the Razor.
The
guy is bulletproof. He's a really cool guy. He's in his mid-50s, and I've been doing barbell training with him, fitness training with him.
Yeah.
He's had an 1.5 inch loss on his waist measurement. He's gained 5 pounds of muscle mass in, I think, 4 or 5 months of training. And he's basically hitting PRs, barbell PRs.
Yeah, he looked good. I saw him the other day in here. I mean, I can tell he'd put on some size because it's been a few months since I've seen him.
We checked his body fat, and I think his body fat has gone down 4 or 5 percentage points.
Yeah.
So he's doing a great job. And he does the program.
Yeah.
He's doing a novice program still. We're kind of a little bit more intermediate novice right now. But one of the things that Jim and I were talking about, and this is what we're going to kind of talk about today, is because we want our clients to feel good, feel able, but also be strong. So we want the physical characteristics that we're driving adaptation towards, which are strength, endurance, flexibility, mobility, accuracy, agility, balance, coordination, all the 10 general physical skills that we're driving towards. But we also want a feeling inside of our clients of, I feel healthy. I feel good. I'm able. Yeah. So we were talking about what's the perfect feel. And he said, I want to be like a gymnast. I want to be body weight strong. And, he's a bull rider. So he's a small guy to start with. We measured his height there. He's like 5'7". I want to be body weight strong. And I said, well, I was a gymnast. And let me tell you don't feel healthy all the time.
Yeah.
But what the concept he's getting at is that he wants to be able to manipulate his body, use his body for whatever activity he's involved in. He ranches a lot and does ropings and works on ranches a lot. He's pretty much retired. And he wants to be able, but he doesn't want his back hurting all the time and his shoulders hurt, because they always do. He hurts everywhere because of being a bull rider.
Right.
But so we're going to talk about some of those concepts and what we do as coaches to facilitate a gradual growth model with our older clients and still not leave them broken, beaten, and scarred.
Yeah. So we're going to go through a couple of just like practical models that you can use. This stuff, as we've mentioned before, is so dependent on the individual, especially when you get to the intermediate, what we call the intermediate stage of progression. It really depends on you and what you want, what your goals are, and what you need, and what your specific weaknesses are. So we can't really talk very specifically in sets and reps. The point is that I want y'all to get from this is the model, right? There are some sort of it's like strategies to approach changing your program that you can play around with.
Let's do one thing real quick. Let's set some basic first principles as coaching staff here of things that we know to be true with the older lifter population. Number one, if you're going to drive any strength gains over time, you have to provide some intensity.
That's
right. You do have
to
provide some intensity. You can't just lift light.
Agreed.
Well, no, let me rephrase that. You can lift light if you want to, and you can just lift light weights, but you're not going to get reasonably stronger lifting light weights.
No.
You have to drive muscle growth and adaptation in the older person.
And that doesn't mean lighter reps, just more reps, lightweight, but more reps. That does not work either, friends.
Right.
I want everyone to understand what Darin is saying. It doesn't work.
Yeah, exactly.
Just because you get up in the morning and you feel sore, you're not getting stronger.
Well, it's funny. I love my father-in-law. He's an amazing man. I won't tell you how old he is, but he's past his seventh.
He looks good.
Yeah. And he's an amazing guy. But every day he gets up and he does, I think he said he does 400 push-ups, and he does a bunch of calisthenics. It's mostly what he learned when he was in the military.
Sure.
And is he reasonably healthy? Very healthy for a guy his age, very able for a guy his age. And I think as someone ages, programming probably needs to look a little bit more like what he's doing.
Yeah.
But it doesn't necessarily need to discount the fact that he should be handling some heavier loads every so often, intermittently. Right. And so, number one thing is that if you're going to be an older person and you want to be reasonably stronger than your cohorts, you're going to have some intensity, and that means load in your program. Okay, when we're talking
Heavy
about barbell
weights.
lifting.
Heavy
Now, when we're
weights.
talking about conditioning, it means high intensity stuff in your program. And so like sprint intervals and things like that. So when we're talking about intensity and conditioning, we're talking mostly about how quick and how hard you go and for how long, okay? Or how quick and how hard, really, and what loads or resistance we apply in that. And when we're talking about barbell lifting, we're talking about how much weight you're moving, okay?
Yeah.
So intensity matters for the older population. You still got to be lifting some heavy loads.
That's right.
Number two, volume matters too. You got to have enough volume to maintain your strength base and to also create slow growth, low stress growth, we would call it, over time. Okay, you've got to have enough volume in to do that. And if you don't have enough volume, number one, top tier strength will decline rapidly. And number two, you'll hit a wall early on.
Yeah.
Okay, you'll hit a wall, an artificial wall that doesn't have to be there necessarily.
Yep. And volume is sets in times reps. So it's just the total number of reps that you're accumulating over a week or 2 weeks or however you want to measure it.
Could be per session, could be per week, could be every 2 weeks, could be every month, whatever.
Now, the thing that we've observed is that too much volume is where you're going to feel beat up and feel like crap. Yeah. So there's a lot of popular programs out there in the strength and conditioning world that intermediate programs that revolve around doing some sort of split where you do one workout where your lifts are going to be intense for a very low number of sets and reps, like 1 set of 5 or 2 sets of 3 or something like that. And then the other workout during that week for that lift will be a volume session, as they call it. And that'll be something like 4 sets of 5 or even 5 sets of 5 or 6 sets of 5, very high volume at a lower weight than your really heavy session that you did earlier in the week. And that's great. And it works really well for younger people because you're getting both stimuli, right? You're getting both the intensity on one day and you're getting the volume on another day. So you get both drivers of growth happening in the week. The problem is, for a lot of masters, you cannot keep that up very long. We're talking like after like 4 to 6 weeks for a lot of these guys, you just start getting beat up.
Well, it's basically the Texas method model in a roundabout way. It's Texas method, and I think we've all figured out that Texas method just doesn't last that long.
That's right.
It's a short programming cycle because most guys, they just hit a wall.
It's punishing, and it's really.
So we go to old man Texas method.
That's right. And so what we're trying to do here is come up with creative ways to get to apply that same concept, but to lower the stress and find that sweet spot where we get just enough stimulus via intensity and just enough volume to continue growing slowly without making your knees and your hips and your back feel beat up all the time. Because we don't want you walking around like an old man or an old lady.
Right. And that was the third first principle, which is basically this. We program intensity and volume to drive health, to drive function, to drive what our real goal here is to make people feel like they're reasonably strong and able, but also when they go out to do something, they're not like, oh man, my back's killing me from training. I can't do. And that's one of the conversations I had with Jim. He was like, I don't want my back to hurt while I'm training. He said, my back hurts already all the time.
Right.
I don't want it to hurt worse. I want this to make me feel better. We were talking about how to do that.
Right.
Yeah.
We train so we can do things in the world.
Yeah.
I mean, I mean, I hate to say there was a point in not so recent past where I trained because I wanted to win. It had no, I'll just lay it out there. I wasn't concerned so much with my body and my health because I'm like, I'm going to do the work it takes to get X. That's not at times very responsible, but there are lots of us that we do that. We go through that competitive phase and it's a high, it's a drug, and it's very fun. It is a season, but that's the key word. It is a season. Yeah. You can't make that season your life because you'll end up being a cripple. Yeah. You really will. And on anything, because Darin Deaton, you've said it, repetitive motion equals hardship on the body. I mean, if you are, I had a client that she does pottery. She sits at a pottery wheel almost every day doing her work. She loves it, but she has issues from sitting in the same position, doing the same motions now for decades. So it's not just training. I'm not bashing training. I don't want y'all to think that. I will never give up training, but you have to end up modifying it for what you want to do. And like Darin just said, I want to be able to do what I want to do with the strength that I have made and what I plan on keeping as I age. And that's really the primary focus. And I think that's the smart focus.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So why don't we do this? Let's go, Trent, why don't you talk about what you've been doing with some of your older client base here at the gym and some of the things that you've seen that have worked that are more sustainable over time? Because, again, another one of those first principles is, I guess we could add that on at the end here, is sustainability. Is this sustainable? Because nothing, you can't do anything forever.
Yeah, that's right.
You just can't do it. Yeah. It's got to change over time.
It has to change. You have
to have moderation.
Yeah, moderation.
Yeah, absolutely.
I've said that.
So I'll say, first of all, before we talk about the specific programming, what I have started doing with our gym population, because a lot of these guys now have been training for a couple of years. They've got a couple of years of training under their belt. So they're fairly advanced trainees. They would be in the lifting world what we would call an intermediate trainee, because they're generally working, when they're doing strength work, on trying to add weight to the bar once every 2 to 3 weeks. Right. That's where most of them are. So we would call that still an intermediate trainee. But first of all, I'm looking at throughout the year, there's probably going to be, every quarter, let's say, they're going to do a strength cycle, and there's going to be a period of time, maybe 2 to 3 weeks, where they're not doing a strength cycle. They're doing more of a conditioning and general physical preparedness. Some people call it GPP, right? Where they're just doing different types of movement. They're not really trying to, they may not be using the barbell at all during that time period. They're doing conditioning, they're doing body weight circuits, they're doing maybe some hypertrophy, like muscle building, bodybuilding type movements. So that's the first concept, is it's not, throughout the year, it's not constantly barbell, right? But during that barbell phase, which might be 2 months out of every 3 months, during the quarter, 2 months out of the quarter, during that barbell phase, I've had some success by modifying the squat and the deadlift in particular. So I found that the upper body lifts, you can generally keep doing quite a lot of volume with them. You can do a lot of 3 sets of 5, 4 sets of 5, 5 sets of 5, and that's not so bad, right? Barring any sort of injuries that a lifter has, you can generally tolerate a lot more work in the upper body lifts. But the lower body lifts are where you've got to be careful with the volume. And so I like what I call the heavy, light, medium model. So let's take a 2-week cycle. In the heavy, light, medium model, a lifter is going to squat or pull, and I'm going to say pull, not necessarily deadlift.
Sure.
But they're going to squat or pull 4 times over 2 weeks. So we've got a 2-week cycle here. Day 1 of squatting will be a heavy day, and they need to hit a PR or at least a heavy weight that's very high up in their
Could be
intensity
a heavy
range.
triple.
It may not be a PR all the time,
Right.
especially if you've been training for a couple of years. It's probably not going to be a PR often, but it needs to be something heavy, and it's generally going to be a couple triples, like 2 sets of 3,
Right.
or maybe a double with a set of 3 back off,
Yeah.
right? But it needs to be very heavy, very low reps. Then on the opposite day of that week, so let's say that happens on a Monday, let's say on a Thursday on that week, they're going to hit a light day. And this could be, if they're doing a squat, this is going to be like 2 sets of 5, let's say, at 80% or 75% of that heavy day
Just
of
movement,
the weight.
basically, yeah.
Yeah, it's basically just active recovery.
Sure.
It doesn't even have to be a squat. This is a great time to do a leg press or to do maybe it's like some lunges or something.
Squat variant.
Just some sort of
type,
squat
yeah.
variant.
Yeah.
Okay, now week number 2, you've got the first medium day. This is what we would call a volume day in a lot of models, like a Texas method type model. The volume day, though, I try to keep it fairly low volume. It's usually 3 sets of 5 for the guys, or it's going to be 4 sets of 4 for the ladies. About 15 reps. And this, I want people doing in the 80 to 90% intensity range. So it's going to be 80 to 90% of the heavy day. It depends on how heavy your heavy is.
Right,
if it's really heavy, if you're squatting in the mid 3s and you're a guy, it's probably going to be more like 80% of that. This is what's driving actual muscle growth and adaptation along with that heavy day. This is where the real work happens, is on the intensity day and on this volume day. Okay, so now we've got one more squat session in our 2-week cycle, and that's the next medium day. And I like this to be 3 sets of 3 for guys. It might be 3 sets of 2 for ladies. And this is going to be like 90% of your heavy day. And that is sort of, it's again, what it's doing there is it's preparing you by getting some heavy weight on your back for the next heavy day, which is coming next week in the new cycle, right? So it's following the same concept that the heavy, light, medium model calls for. We're varying. We've got an intensity session in there. We've got a volume session in there, and we've got some active recovery. But we're spreading it out where it's not happening weekly, it's happening every other week. And that allows you plenty of time to recover between those 2 hard sessions, which are going to be your intensity day and your volume day.
Yeah, it's not a 3 training session cycle. It's a 4 training session cycle. So it spreads into the next week. Naturally, it spreads into the first of the next week.
So there's lots of recovery.
You're still training from the week prior into the next week. So if you wanted to think about it that way.
Exactly. And so the way I think about it, the 2 workouts that are really driving progress here are your intensity day and your volume day. And you get a week between those. So you get lots of recovery. But it's not like the reason you have that extra medium day, the 3 sets of 3, is so that it's not been a whole week since you've put something really heavy on your back.
Sure.
You're still keeping it fresh. So it's just enough work to keep you from anything being a surprise when you unrack it. But I find it's really easy to recover from. And one last note on this, because we're only squatting twice a week, this frees up a lot of time on your midweek. If you're doing a 3-day-a-week program, like a lot of people are, most people here at the gym are, that frees up a lot of time on your Wednesday, your middle weekday, to do conditioning. You can do some extra arm work. If you want to work on your upper body strength, you can do more like a bench and a press on the same day.
Right.
Or you can do more conditioning on that day. It gives you a lot of time to work on other physical goals, which is nice.
Yeah, or plan that day to take jiu-jitsu or whatever.
Yeah,
hobby
exactly.
you
Use your
have.
strength.
That would be
go
Use your
biking.
perfect. Right.
Yeah, that's a great time. And you're not really running into any recovery issues on your other workouts by doing this.
Sure.
So that's the basic idea. Now I talked about it with squats. You can do the same thing with deadlifts.
Right.
And I do the exact same concept. The only thing I would say is that I really like with the pulling lifts to make that light day a non-deadlift. That would be like a barbell row. It could be
Give the back a rest.
yeah,
in some ways.
it could even be like weighted
Yeah.
chin-ups or something. It's still working the back, but you're not working the deadlift on that day.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. No. Good.
yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like to I think those are all good concepts. And I like to do something. I've been doing something with our ladies here. Now, remember, all of these programming ideas that we're talking about are not in consideration of the novice or in anywhere in the novice phase at all.
Yeah, you will detrain if you try to do this and you're still a novice. You need to be fairly...
No, these are individuals that have some volume over time, some intensity over time, some training history. They've hit some walls. They've hit several walls potentially, and we're just trying to continue to stimulate growth. So we're going to everything from changing from a microcycle type programming model to a larger, kind of a medium macrocycle type programming model. We're driving the adaptation cycle, the timeline between when we have a stimulus and a stress and the timeline to when we're wanting to see that gain realized. We're just driving that out farther. And with the more mature trainee as a general concept, that timeline becomes longer and longer and longer and longer and longer and longer and longer. So originally, when you start with, it's session by session. People get stronger.
Yeah.
Then it's every 2 sessions. Then it's every 3 sessions. Now it's once every 2 weeks. Then it's once every 3.5 weeks. Then it's once a month.
Right.
Then it's once every 2 months, once a quarter. Then it's once a biannual thing. Then it's once a year.
Right. Right.
And that's where it gets really
It's so
hard.
true.
This is where it gets really hard for a lot of people who lift weights and who do true fitness programming, who are not just doing exercising, who actually have goals and have a model they're trying to adhere to. And I call this is kind of the Badlands part of training where you can really get lost, guys.
Yes. Yeah.
And you really can get frustrated, and then you just kind of fall off the face of the earth in fitness for a while because you just don't know where to go, and how to change things. So our goal
you change too much.
Yeah, exactly.
And then they don't know what happened, and then they're like, well, I guess this is the end. And a lot of people will fall off the training wagon and they'll just decide they'll do something weird. Like they'll go off and, I don't know, Zumba or who knows, because they're just like, well,
I want to do a podcast that says, just because the gain stop doesn't mean the train stops because that is going to happen.
Yeah.
I probably, with my goals, my personal goals right now, this year in 2021, I probably have hit most of my PRs in a lifetime. I'll be 54 in less than a month. I probably hit most of my PRs in a lifetime when it comes to lifting. I don't have a problem with that. Yeah. I don't have a problem with that because it's winning a national competition or something is not in my goal set right now. Now that might change, that might change in the next year or so. But for right now, what's on the radar screen, I think that individuals have to, I think we have to recognize that there's going to come a time where the gains are going to stop and that you still train and you do whatever you can to reduce the deterioration of your physical capabilities over time.
Yep.
You do whatever you can to slow that curve down. And that's what we're talking about. This kind of programming does that. This kind of programming it becomes less boring. It engages the client. It also allows the client to see gains in certain areas. We might be totally maintaining in one particular area or 2 areas, 1 or 2 lifts, but we might be driving this other lift over here because we know there's still some fruit on the tree that could be picked.
And you bring up a great point, Darin, that you cannot, when you're doing this kind of programming, if you're new to this kind of realm and you're just kind of like not sure what to do or how to rate your progress, you've got to take a look at those non-PR days, right? So everybody wants to look at the intensity, like how much weight am I going to do? What's the max weight I'm going to do in my 2-week cycle that we just spelled out? I'm like, well, like I said, you may not be hitting PRs all the time, but pay attention to what you're doing on your 3x5 days or your 4x4 days, right?
Sure.
Because, or your accessory days when you're doing your barbell row or whatever it is, right? You'll often set PRs there, right? Where it's like, hey, I've never done that for 3 sets of 5 before. Or I used to do that for 2 sets of 3, and now that's my 3 sets of 5.
Yeah.
Or, whatever it is.
Sure.
That's progress that you can measure there because the top end, you're not always going to hit PRs. And in fact, that happens a lot. That happens to me all the time where I don't hit a PR on my top end when I'm peaking for a meet, let's say.
Yeah.
But on the way, I actually hit I hit some like 3x5 or 5x5 PRs,
Sure,
or
sure.
whatever. So I keep track of all of my rep ranges because it's important.
Good.
Yeah.
No, that's good.
And it keeps me engaged too. I feel like I'm getting somewhere.
Yeah, and I think one PR might be that I hit 12 training sessions in a month or whatever. You know what I mean? I went a quarter and hit all my training sessions.
Yeah.
I haven't had any infectious diseases in a quarter. You
Yes,
know?
yeah,
I mean, I've been
yeah.
healthy, and
Right,
so
right.
I mean, there's a lot of things to look at there. There's a lot of big picture things that we should be looking at. But so here's one thing that I've been doing with my ladies class, and we did this for a while. We just had a conversation in the last one or two sessions where we're going to go back to this again. We kind of got off of it. Everybody kind of fell off the train for a while with the whole COVID thing and with the holidays, and then we've had people in and out and have other things. You know, one of us would get exposed to COVID and we didn't want to expose the others, so they wouldn't come into the gym. And so we've had a lot of variance in training. But one of the things I like to do is I like to do a model with my older lifter population that is similar to like an old man Texas method model, but the middle day incorporates. So in day one of the week in training that day is going to be a heavy day, and that day is going to incorporate. It's either going to be 3 sets of 3. It could be 3 sets of 5. If on my females, I would prefer for that day to be more like 3 sets of 3, 4 sets of 3. I keep them in the 3s. That's going to be my heavy day. And that's going to be a heavy lifting session. That's going to be something that's probably 90% of what their 1 rep max would be. So it's going to be a heavy day. We're going to be driving growth on that day every single week. Okay. And we are doing this weekly. Okay. Because we're going to have 2 lifting, but we're only going to have 2 lifting sessions a week. Okay, traditional barbell lifting sessions with the big lifts.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I like to do is I like to have my ladies lift heavier in the first of the week and lighter at the end of the week. So it's really similar to Texas method, but I flip it. So I find when they have 2 days to rest over the weekend, they psychologically do better with doing their heavy stuff on Monday and their lighter stuff on Friday.
Sure.
Okay. When we do this.
Yeah, agree. That's my personal choice too, as well. It always has been.
Yeah. And on their heavy day,
I'm way better on a Monday.
Yeah. And on their heavy
Monday
day,
is a good
it's
day.
not going to be the classical 1 set of 3, 1 set of 5 that Texas method drives. It's going to be more like a couple of sets of something that's heavy.
Yeah.
But it's not going to be a PR for a single or anything like that.
Sure.
It's going to be, but it's going to be heavy. All right. And so I will have them do, like I said, I'll have them do 2 sets of 3, 3 sets of 3, something really heavy. I might even do some doubles of something that's really heavy.
Yeah.
It's going to be at least 90% of what their 1 rep max is if we have a recent 1 rep max on them. And I'm going to be driving change and adaptation, but I'm also going to be focusing on their ability to get under heavy loads, psychologically and physically get under heavy loads. That would be my Monday. I do that with their pulling lifts. I do that with all their lifts, actually. And then I alternate their upper body lifts just like we would with Texas method. But I do that with all their lifts, with their pull and their squat. On Wednesday, when they come back in the gym, we do nothing but accessory work.
Yeah.
Nothing but accessory work. So we've been working barbell curls. We've been working skull crushers or tricep extensions. We've been working some dip work and some ring work where we do ring rows, ring dips, work upper body hypertrophy. And it's mostly higher set, higher rep work to do nothing but hypertrophy work.
Yeah.
Add a little size to the muscle. Add a little bit more surface area to the muscle and fill it up with some fluid. Fill it up with some blood flow.
The pump.
Yeah, get them a little pump.
Got some pump.
Yeah, exactly. And we also do chin-ups on that day. And we really focus more on volume and more on accessory stuff that day.
Yeah.
Okay. So they get sore from that sometimes, but it's not so daunting that we then can't go on our Friday and we do our volume stuff.
Yeah.
Okay. We do our volume work on Friday. And so they're getting 3 sessions in a week. We're driving growth every single Monday with our top sets and our top tier strength work. But we're supporting that growth and that strength with the accessory work for the smaller muscle groups, they're going to help us drive those, especially with women, those upper body lifts that start to stall. Everybody can't be as strong as Charity in the upper body lifts. And then we take the Friday day to be our volume driver to make sure that we have enough total pounds lifted that week and that we support it and we don't deteriorate until the following. We don't want to have a detraining effect before Monday hits again to hit that heavy load again.
Yeah, and I
can do this for weeks. I mean, I found that I can do this for quite a while.
So this is a question I have for you, Charity. Is so one of the problems you run into, right, is when you start spreading out. So like when you're coming from a novice to this intermediate style of training, you're not hitting your heavy weight on the bar, but once every week, once every 2 weeks, once every 3 weeks. So one of the problems you have is just I think it's mostly mental, but there's also maybe some central nervous thing going on there that. It's like, I've got to take that out of the rack and do it. Like, I'm not ready. You know, if I've been doing a bunch of stuff at like 80% of that weight, it's like all of a sudden you're like, holy crap, I'm just like not prepared to lift this. Even though your recovery and everything might be fine. How do you manage that, Charity, of like keeping the feel, right? The mental like ability to take a heavy weight out of the rack and manage it?
I like walkouts. I'll load the bar and walk something out so I keep a reminder that it's fine. It just feels heavy. And then I just put it back. I'll hold it for a few seconds and then I'll put it back in. Same thing with upper body.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
Same thing with upper body. Press, I'll load the bar. I'll walk that puppy out, be proud, big chest, hold that sucker. It's fine. Because what people don't understand, when stuff's heavy, it's really not about the load. It's about your technique.
Yeah,
if you can stay calm and cool and keep that bar close to the midline, super tight, and resist the load the entire time like we're supposed to do without letting our brain take over, that's the golden ticket. Yeah. It has nothing really else to do what's on the bar. That's just, it's just a heavy load. You know?
Yeah. You've you definitely taught me that in this last couple meets that I've done. I talked to you about working on my press as I was peaking for a strength meet. And that's one of the things that you kind of had me do is you looked at a couple of my videos and you're like, hey, just calm down, slow down, you know, be comfortable with that weight in your hands. Because I was trying to get too jacked up and too aggressive, right? I was trying to just like, you know, and there's a sweet spot there, right? You can't be flat when you're taking out a heavy weight, but you also need to be calm and
think about like a samurai. They look calm, cool. They've got a, you know, probably even like a Navy SEAL the same way, right? They're killers.
Yeah.
But they have their composure is just, I mean, like, wow. Like, I wish I could be in their brain. Like, what's going on in there? Because you know, there's some adrenaline in there, but you would never see it. They are just like ice.
It's like controlled.
That's the control. Yeah. A true athlete, someone that, you know, their life is competing. Yeah. You can see that in their face. You can see that in their eyes. They're not out there. Yeah. No.
You know, I find that doing these kinds of programs where the hardest thing as you age over time is being accepting of loads. I can actually, okay. I know that what we know in programming is this. We said this earlier in the podcast that if someone is older and they're going to want to continue to at least maintain or get stronger, they got to handle some load. They got to put weight on the bar. Yeah, it's got to be heavier. But in the gym, when I'm in the gym, it feels better, and I put that in quotation marks, to just do some sets and reps with lighter weight. Yeah. But guys, that will not drive growth over time. You've got to be willing to weekly or every 2 weeks, whatever cycle you're on, or if you're doing like an undulating periodization model, you know, where you're doing percentage loads over time and you're doing it in a 3-week cycle. Maybe it's a 3 or 4 or 6 week cycle. You've got to be willing over that, whatever that cycle that you've been prescribed to do is, you've got to be willing at some point to get a little bit heavier, a little bit heavier, a little bit heavier until you hit some real heavy loads. But our goal here is to make it to where I also recognize this, that as I get older, lifting as heavy as often as I did in the past just makes me feel trashed too.
Right.
And also doing too much volume just makes me feel trashed
Right.
too. Everything makes me feel trashed unless it's more moderate. And if I am going to do some heavier loads, I have to dial the volume back.
Right.
On that day. I have to definitely dial the volume back. That's why sometimes like I'll go in and if I know that I'm just feeling just beat up, I'll do a heavy triple for my squat that day and I'm done.
That's right.
With squats.
Yeah.
I'll do a heavy triple and I'm done.
Bam. Yeah.
You know?
Now, folks, let's remember, this is him not missing sessions. This is him staying to his program.
Yeah.
So on that day, that's your reward.
Right.
Yeah.
You can't just do that and that's all you do. That's not what we're saying. So everybody out in Radio Land, listen to the whole show because that's not going to get you stronger and you will detrain.
Right. And I was talking to Rip one time about this because we were in the gym one evening and he was I can't remember why I was there. I think I was there for a seminar or something. Or no, I think I just went up to train or something. And he was deadlifting that night. And I said, how often do you deadlift? He said, I'll do 2 sets today and I'll do it maybe once every 2 weeks, 3 weeks or something like that. I can't remember what the timeline was. I can't quote him exactly, but I was surprised. But it was heavy for him. It was a heavy set. It was a heavy 2 sets.
I've seen him do that. I've seen him do that. I'm just
it was a heavy 2 sets. And I was like, dang, dude. And I was like, so you did that once every 2-3 weeks? He said, yep. I said, what other deadlifting you do? He said, I'm not. And I was like, and you're still driving a little bit of growth over time. He said, real slowly, but my goal is to maintain that too. And I was like, and so what's happening is it kind of shocks your body.
Yeah.
It shocks your endocrine system. It shocks your testosterone. It shocks your body into recognizing that you're going to make it do something heavy every so often. And that frequency might become less frequent, but you're going to do it.
Right.
And I think that's what a lot of older trainees have to recognize is that you got to continue to try to lift that heavy load in some cycle of timeline as you get older and older and older and older.
Yep. I like
because
that.
you're going to decline. You're going to decline.
Right. The goal is you're trying to keep the weight on the bar. Like Rip is trying to maintain that. And that's his goal. And I think over all of this programming talk, you need to have a goal.
Yeah.
Whatever that is, keeping the weight on the bar, adding weight on the bar, adding more reps. And that goal changes. We're not telling you to pick one goal and stick with that. No, it evolves as you train.
That's
that goal
right.
changes.
And it can be something like Darin was saying, like, hey, my goal is like this month. I want my back to feel good I'm going to hit every session this month that I have planned. I want my back to feel good the whole time. Like that's a good goal right there.
Great.
Because that's
no
not
back pain or less back pain and feeling good.
And that gives you some latitude to where it's like you don't have to box yourself in with these numbers that you put on the page because that's not your goal. You didn't set a number goal on the bar that month. The goal is simply to do all your sessions and then have your back feel good. So that means that it might end up being 5 to 10% less than maybe the last quarter when you were doing this program, but you're giving yourself space to continue to get the training in, right? Do you see what I mean? Right.
Let's have this quick conversation real quick. You're 50 years old and you weigh 200 pounds and you can, for a working set, squat 315. Who says that's not strong? How much is enough? What more do you need to do? On your light days, you could squat high 2s with more volume. On your heavy day, you're squatting, maybe you could squat a triple in the mid 3s or something like that.
Yeah.
But you could go in and literally do 3 sets of 5 at 315 for a guy that weighs 200 pounds, is reasonably tall, so forth and so on. And he's in his 50s. What more does he need? I think the challenge that we're running in the strength world today is this idea that everybody has to, yes, we want people to reach their maximum genetic potential, but that maximum genetic potential might not be the maximum health potential.
Right.
Well, social media has made it that way, Darin. That's the reason I think people need to not have their phone on. Like, it's fine to you have your favorites that you watch, but what ends up happening is you end up not watching their form or their programming. You end up watching their numbers, and that's not healthy.
Right.
You do you, man.
Right, right. Well, and
if
you walk into a gym, sometimes I feel this way. I walk into a gym, with a bunch of starting strength coaches or lifters, and I'll go in and I'll do 3 sets of 5 with low 3s or something like that. Or maybe it's a light day and I'll do high 2s, and I feel like I'm not strong in the group.
Right.
The reality is, for a guy my age and my size and everything, who says that's not strong? And I'm not trying to be a puss about it, but I think that's still reasonably very strong.
Yeah.
And so now, if a guy comes in and he's 200 pounds and he's 5'10", 5'11", and he can squat 185 barely for a triple, that's not strong.
Yeah.
That's he's not even squatting body weight yet.
You need to keep working on that.
Yeah. And so I think there's some general guidelines and general concepts here. But what we're really saying here, folks, is all of these programming ideas that Charity has, that Trent has, that I have, all of these are built on some first principles and some foundations that, first of all, we understand programming. We train for a lot of trainees and lots of hours of ourselves. And we're using those principles to then apply it to the individual lifter or the group of lifters in a specific programming model, because we know what the principles are.
Yeah, that's right.
And the principles are volume and intensity and exercise selection and all these things that we've talked about, nutrition and rest and all these other things. But these are some ways that we can begin to become creative with programming and still drive growth and when I say growth, I don't always mean strength. It might be consistency. It might be loads over time. It might be health, how you're feeling. Wow, man, in the last quarter, my strength really hasn't increased, but I feel better than I did before. And my strength's about the same.
Right.
That's awesome.
Huge. That's huge.
That's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so
I agree.
I think that there's just, we've got to keep these things in perspective.
Absolutely. So let's talk about one more example here. And at Charity, I think you've got some examples here. What if you need to dial things down more? So we've talked about kind of spreading out the rate of adaptation so that it happens over a longer period of time and how to make that happen. What if you need to kind of dial down your overall stress from training significantly, but you don't want to just stop altogether?
Well, that's easy for me. A lot of people, so let's go back. Let's say the stress is from doing stuff like I have a homestead now. So basically my time is different. So it's a time management thing. And to make sure that I don't make excuses and don't get anything done, I'm probably going to end up doing a main lift every day. That means I'll do something every day of the week.
Okay. Yeah.
On the days when I can do more, I'll add upper bodies, kind of like what you would do on a 4-day split. And then add some accessories, but then change and do different variations of the main lifts. I'm just going to have to tailor it to how my day goes, what I'm doing. If I'm working out in over 100-degree weather, and I'm going to do that before the sun comes out, and I may be out there for 6 hours, who knows? I'm not going to feel great when I come in, but I know I got to do something, and it's not going to be a full workout. That's ridiculous. If I do that on top of a day of working, doing manual labor, I'm going to be trashed for the next day and won't be able to do my stuff on the property and then come in and try to do some type of work. So we have to moderate, get our work in. And so I'll try the one lift a day, probably do volume intensity, try to get at least squat 3 times, over my 7 days. I'd like to be able to do, volume, intensity, and then some variation of a squat. So maybe a pause.
Something lighter, but...
Right, something lighter. But, I'm just going to see. There's no set program. It may be day to day on how my programming. I'll know what lift I'm going to do. But when it comes to adding those variations or different variables, it may be the day of that I plan that.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. So
and eventually I can maybe see a pattern, because my work days, I'm hoping I can scale them down where I'm doing pretty much the same type of work over the week. And so I can plan accordingly and have more of a, maybe a 2-week block set up of what I'm going to do.
Okay.
But that's my first thing. And honestly, if I have a lifter that comes, they're having life stress, work has changed, any of that, and they can't do a full body, they're like, I just can't. It's one lift a day. We're
Yeah.
keeping the habit,
I
and
like
we're going to
that
do
too.
some
if you have
work.
if you have like a garage gym or you have really
Yeah.
close access to your training like you
Yes.
do, your training facilities,
Yes.
that works perfect too. And you're doing something for your health and fitness, your sense of wellness every single day. I like
Yeah.
that too. And
But if
it
you got to
just
go to the
seems
gym,
less
that's
daunting.
hard. If you
Yeah.
go to, if you don't
Yeah.
have your gym, it's harder. That's where the only other option is you got to do 2 days a week, friends. You got to.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
got to be the full body enchilada and just get in there and
Yep.
do it. But like that goes perfect with Darin's, because if you can go Monday, Friday, and then at home you have the stuff
Do
to do
something
the
in the middle.
accessory. Right. You got the dumbbells.
Yeah.
You've got kettlebells, whatever.
Chin up
you
bar,
can do that
maybe.
part
Whatever.
at,
Well,
yeah,
that's exactly
you can do that
what
at home.
That's
Yeah.
exactly what
Yeah.
one of my female clients does. She sometimes has been missing the Wednesday, but no big deal because she has the stuff at home that she can do and she just mimics it at home. And then on Friday, she comes back in and hits her weights again.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and we actually, with her, we only squat once a week and we do leg press on the other day. She's 67 and we do a squat variant on the other day.
Yeah. I like that.
Yeah,
so
age matters. Age, and I'm sorry, sex matters.
Yeah.
Female, male, we are different, and so these programming, all that we've talked about, it's going to look different. It's
Right,
individual based.
yeah, I'll tell
So-
you what. This was interesting. I'm reflecting back on when we met with Doug Eade, who is now Doug is 90 years old, but at the time he was 88, and we remarked like because we visited him at his house, and we're like, man, Doug gets around great. I mean, he stands up tall, his posture is good, he's got good muscle mass considering he's 88, right? He actually has muscle
Right.
mass. That's amazing. But I remember watching Doug when he owned his gym. What he would do is a couple times a day, when I'd be in there, he would walk around. He'd just do like little circuits. Like he would put 225 on the squat bar. It was a cambered squat bar, and he would just take it out of the rack, and he would do walkouts like you're talking about, Charity. And then sometimes he'd do like little quarter squats. And at first I was like, he's just screwing around, And then he would go around, he'd walk over and do some dumbbell sets, some curls, some presses. And then I started to realize when we met him again a couple of years later at his house, and he talked about doing the same thing. He's like 5 days a week, I do like a little dumbbell circuit. I'll get out there when the weather's nice and I'll do some like quarter squats. What he's doing is, remember, he's 88.
Right.
He's loading his body with that heavy weight.
Right.
Doug probably can't do a full squat anymore.
Right.
He's 88. But he's loading his body regularly with heavy weight, making his body get that stimulus,
Right.
and then he's getting some reps in where he can in the range of motion that he has, which is easier for him with dumbbells.
Right.
So that's I like that. That's
Yeah,
interesting.
I had someone say, one of my physical therapists that works with me, and has an exercise science major too, trains some clients too. He's a great guy. His name is Jason, and he said the other day, I was saying, man, yeah, we ate lunch yesterday, and I said, I'm just having a hard time getting in the gym and getting all my barbell lifts done and everything. I was talking to him about that, and I said, going to the ranch and we're fixing it and doing a bunch of stuff. He's like, dude, what are you doing at the ranch? I said, well, the other night I painted a propane tank and I lifted a bunch of feed and I fed cows. And then I rode one of my 2.5-year-olds to work on him because he needs some time. He's like, hey, you're exercising out there. Just make it work, dude. He's like, why are you doing this? I mean, you're lifting to be able to do all those things. And so I think sometimes we become so narrow-minded and focused that we think it's got to be 3 days a week or we think it's got to be 4 days a week.
Right.
And again, we go back to this idea. We're talking about more intermediate to advanced style trainees here. We're not talking about novices here.
Right.
We all three of us as coaches want you to build a base, a foundation of muscle mass. I have had several guys. I trained another guy in South Africa. He hadn't trained in 6 months almost because of COVID and just their travel schedule and everything else. He's been training again. He said, I was so surprised how good I felt getting back under the bar and how quickly I'm gaining back.
Yeah.
Because he had
Yeah.
built a foundation.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
I think it's key that you remember that you take everything that we're saying and you need to listen to the first 120 podcasts before you listen to this.
That's right.
Because it could be misleading if all you hear is this.
Right. And the thing is, too, I think this is important. It's something that I've learned a lot in the last year as a coach, me still being a fairly young coach, is the proof is in the pudding. You know, when you watch a guy like Doug Eade and he's 89 years old and he's still getting around great and he has good posture, it's like maybe there's something to what he's doing. Even though it looks goofy from your perspective, it's like maybe there's something to that, right? So it's not always going to look the way that we think our programming should look.
Yeah, exactly. And I think as we age, Dr. Sully and a lot of those guys that are pioneers in our industry and training the older population, and his book, Barbell Prescription, is phenomenal. A bunch of these style programs in his book, in the back of his book, that he and
Andy Baker.
Yeah, Andy Baker. Co-wrote. But, your programming becomes more, I won't say it becomes more complicated always, but it becomes more creative. Mm-hmm. But all of the programming concepts are built on a very specific set of knowledge base, a very specific set of principles that we're using here. For example, is we know you're not going to get stronger if only you do 50% of the load with 3 sets of 12. You're just not going to get stronger necessarily. Not once you're a fairly significant lifter. You have some history, a more mature lifter. So there's some concepts that you have to adhere to that are just, they're biology. It's human biology.
Right.
And we can also play with some of these things. Like I have some of my older guys, I have a guy right now doing 10 sets of singles for upper body lifts. Mm-hmm. And he loves it.
Right.
And he's getting stronger, and we're driving the upper body lifts, and he's doing PRs every single. 10 times.
Yeah.
And more than that, his range of motion, he's keeping his range of motion a lot. When you get older, that is huge, friends. You can't do anything if you lose the ability to put your arm over your head or to bend over and touch your toes and pick something up. I mean, I'm old, but I'm not old, but I worry about that a lot because I don't want to lose the ability of doing things that I like doing now when I'm 75. That is huge.
Yeah.
Like, it's not just about the range of motion. And Darin, you and Dr. Hankey have taught me just in the few times I've had visits with you all how important that is.
Sure. Yeah, it is important. And I think we've got to, again, what we're talking about, guys, is just some basic programming, some more advanced programming models that we've used with our older population. And we don't have names for these. I mean, Trent calls his the heavy, light, medium. I just use a Texas. I took the Texas Method model and I've just created a variant of it. But the foundation of it was Texas Method.
Right.
And then I made it into Old Man Texas Method until that wouldn't work. And then I changed it from there. And so there's a lot of just whatever you do, make sure that it's working.
Yeah, that's
whatever
right.
you do, don't just put your body through stuff just to put your body through stuff. Make sure that
you need to be able to see an improvement.
Yes,
a documented improvement. Either the weight going up, the reps going up,
sense of wellness, better health, better functionality. That you're more functional.
Yep.
Functional.
Yeah, that's we were talking about this the other day. Like, I realized I know more about how my lifters are responding to the programming by watching them in between the sets than during the set. Like, during the set, I can watch how fast the bar's moving and how good their range of motion is and all that kind of stuff. That's good information. But honestly, I learn a lot of them just watching them when they go sit down and rest between squat sets or whatever. Like, if they're hobbling around like an old man, they're real stiff and they're kind of tentative when they sit down, I'm like, ooh, he's getting torched, or she's getting torched. Like, I need to back off here. Like, we need to change it up. And I've realized how much that wellness actually drives my programming decisions.
Yeah, you don't know what it feels like to be older until you be older.
So you just start limping for no reason.
No, you just don't know what it feels like. I mean, it's hard to explain to a trainee, and it's hard to explain to an athlete, and it's hard for an athlete to explain to a coach who's older, to a coach who's significantly younger, what it feels like to be, in your 5th decade or 6th decade or 7th decade of life. So there's some wisdom there that we learn from. And I think we all, we have 3 different ages here, really.
Yeah.
I'm the oldest, Charity's the second oldest, and Trent's the youngest. And so we're all this is very experiential too.
Yeah.
As I am training and getting older, I'm feeling what really works for me and what still makes me feel pretty dang strong, but also mobile. And, it's my birthday month. And at the end of my birthday month, you know what I do on my birthday every year? I do my standing back flip. So as long as I can do my standing back flip every year into my 6th, 7th, and 8th decade, what if I'm 80 and doing a standing back flip?
That would
That's
be
crazy.
That'd be
and I
freaking
hope-
awesome.
I hope you
That'd be
can.
amazing.
I looked up on Guinness Book of World Records, and I could not find on there. I Googled it,
Yeah.
but I didn't actually look on Guinness's website. But I couldn't find the age of the oldest person who could do a standing back flip. Now, I saw one guy that does standing back into water. He does it into the pool, and he's like 90 something.
Oh yeah, that's pretty
Yeah,
good.
that's amazing.
That's pretty good.
Yeah. But still,
Well,
so
maybe we'll get Guinness out to set that.
yeah, I don't think 54 is the age yet. I think I got to
Maybe like 70 or something.
gotta
We'll
say
start having them
decades.
come out every
Yeah.
year.
Yeah, I got a
some
ways to go.
decades.
So,
Yeah.
well, hey guys, we appreciate you listening to our podcast to the 40 Fit Radio and just listening to our rantings today on programming. We hope we didn't confuse you too much, but remember that a lot of programming, as you get into the intermediate phase of programming and you get into more advanced programming, it just matters. With trainees that are novices, we follow a fairly rigid programming model all the way up into novice intermediate, novice advanced, and then even also early intermediates. So just remember that when you think about these concepts. Our number one goal is to try to make people be better.
Yep.
And so if you want to check us out, you can go to 40fit.com. You can also go to @40fitradio on Instagram. Trent's @Marmalade Cream. I'm @Dr. Deaton. Charity, what are you again?
Charity_Silver Strength, I believe, on
Okay.
Instagram.
@charity_Silver Strength. And then you can also check us out on Facebook, 40Fit Nation. And you can email us, info@40fit.com. Have a great week this week. Stay healthy, stay strong, and get out there and do the work. Later, guys.